Okay, good morning, everybody. This is the Corporate Scrutiny panel for Kirklees Council, and we've got an interesting and packed meeting for you today. Just want to start by appreciating Philip Charleno, who has been a member of our panel for a good some time and a great contributor to it as a co-optee. So there's my thanks on behalf of the council to Philip for his contributions. Appreciated. So thank you. We will kick off with membership of the committee.
We've had apologies from Councillor John Taylor.
Okay, thank you. Those are received and accepted. And also today we have as an observer Christina Parks, who's going to be looking at us as a co-optee going forward, perhaps. Okay. So minutes of the previous meeting. Are we happy to approve those minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, members. Do any members have any interests to declare?
No.
Okay. Excellent. Admission of the public. As much as we can admit them to a virtual meeting, all this is going to be held in public. There is an informal meeting at the end, so if members can hang on for that, where we'll be looking at the Kirklees Common Strategy. Okay, any deputations or petitions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Public question time. Are we expecting anything?
No notification of any.
Thank you. Right, so straight over to the technology strategy and Terence Hudson. I'm not seeing Terence. Is he?
I'm here.
Right?
I'm here. Sorry,
Yes.
I was very slow at unmuting. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a bright and sunny March morning. It's beautiful outside. I have some slides. But I'm happy just to talk to them and see everybody's faces rather than fill the screen up with them. So I shall just start with a quick reminder. I mean, if you want to see the slides, shall I put them up? Oh, we're okay with the faces.
I'm getting a nod from James. Anybody else wants to see the slides? Anybody needs visual aids?
I mean, I don't mind. Sorry, I was just nodding in the sense that we don't actually have the slides in the pack, do we? But
don't have the slides in the pack, no.
Okay, so yeah, I'm happy for you to talk to them, Terence, without displaying them.
Okay, then I'll talk to them. No problem. So I'll wind the clock back ever slightly, a couple of years. We just prior to lockdown 1, we actually had an informal scrutiny meeting, and we talked through our technology strategy. And fundamentally, that strategy is split into 7 key component parts. We have getting the basics right, which is about the way we deliver service just day to day, making sure that all of you guys can work and all of our workforce can work. And obviously 2 years ago, that was the fundamental basis that we helped everybody work from home in a hurry. The second heading is called enabling resilient and available infrastructure. That really is about a big shift on our core infrastructure. That's our network, our servers, and all that kind of stuff that makes the council work in the way it works today. The next one is called commissioning applications fit for the future. And again, this really is quite internally facing. These are the IT systems that make the council tick. It really is as simple as that. And then you start moving into a different space for us, I suppose. It starts with thinking about using data intelligent and securely. So we are talking about data in its own right, and we have a link into the strategy around data and intelligence. But also that's where we start talking about cyber security and cyber resilience and all that kind of stuff. And you know, if we really want to get into a detailed conversation about cyber, that is something I would rather do at another time outside of this room rather than do it inside the room based on what's happening in the world. Then we move into more of an outward facing view. So one of the things that we really wanted to push with our strategy was, you know, most IT departments in large organizations are very inward looking. They're very much about keeping the business ticking. So then we're really talking about the next heading is developing inclusive skills and technology. We never used the words digital inclusion in our strategy 2 years ago because we split into 2 parts. One is about skills, and then the second part we call connecting people, business and technology. So that is about making sure people are connected, where they want to be connected, and providing them with services that make a difference to them, but also it's around doing the same for businesses as well. So, you know, when you think in terms of the way we work with the big connectivity providers, it's one thing getting broadband into people's homes, but it's also about getting it into people's businesses as well, and so on and so forth. And the last but not least, certainly by far the least, is around what do you build on top of that. So we talk about delivering class-leading internet services. So once you've got all of those building blocks in place, you've got people skilled up who know how to use the technology, use it in different places. It's what services you overlay on top of that, and that's where the power of the internet comes in. Okay, so that's just a quick introduction. Next slide on my page. And I'm going to do some reflection of the last financial year. So under the getting the basics right, I've got three brief bullet points. One was around you know, keeping the workforce working. So we delivered over 1,000 laptops to staff last year, and it was really quite important about, you know, keeping the workforce being effective. So the next part of it was around that transition from this, which is meetings purely held virtually, into physical spaces. So we supported getting full council back in the hall in Kirklees Town Hall, but also around getting meetings more hybrid. So where you wanted physical meetings with people in a room to make decisions, but you also want to invite people in virtually. So we saw a lot of that technology as well, and it's quite groundbreaking stuff at the time, to be honest. And I think the team did a fantastic job. And then the last kind of bit we did towards the end of the year was really, again, it was a reflection on what happened during COVID. One of the things that happened was mail started piling up everywhere, because mail was entering buildings and buildings were shut or not staffed fully. So we've now got what we call a digital post room set up. So quite a large volume of mail we are now scanning and distributing electronically, and we've got processes in place to make sure that gets out and about in the right way. So I'll move on to the infrastructure heading. So a couple of things that we've really started, I suppose, in the last 2 quarters, really. One is around, we've got some network consultants to look at the way we design what our new network will be. And it's again, it's not just about delivering services for staff. It's about having that forward view of, so what does services going to feel like for members of the public in the future? So how do we do things more to place-based level? And then the second heading there is, because work probably hasn't gone as fast as we would like, around building on the high-speed network link that we've got from Network Rail from Dewsbury to Huddersfield. So that's building a huge amount of resilience into our network and data throughput between Huddersfield and Dewsbury, so we can really kind of strengthen up the role of Dewsbury in our forward plans. On the next heading, commissioning applications fit the future. We've started implementing two major systems. One is the new housing system that's hopefully going to go live in September of this year. The other one is the adult social care system, and the target currently for that is around this time next year for the adult social care system. And there's lots of other smaller systems that are in play. But just one example of that is that we're looking at a hospital to home system as well that was good, and we're working through the implementation of that. In terms of the using data intelligently and securely, I've used the word diligently because I think that the team have been quite diligent over the last 12 months. In fact, a bit more than 12 months really, but the threat level seems to have heightened certainly over the last 12, 18, 24 months. So we've fended off a couple of zero-day attacks. You know, we've seen more attacks at our perimeter, but yeah, I suppose that's part of life for any business or any business that ends in .com anywhere on the planet as well. We have put further steps in place to secure our information assets in terms of the way that we back up our data, and that's being implemented as we speak. And what, you know, the key building block of all of that is we maintain our accreditation to the public sector network. That is a big deal. It takes a lot of energy, but it takes a huge amount of energy trying to keep all of our systems patched and up to date. But it's something we have to put the effort into to make sure that we can maintain our presence on the public sector network until it is retired at some point in the future. Moving on to the right-hand side of my slide that I can see, we've got the developing inclusive technology and skills. Like I say, the words digital inclusion didn't appear anywhere in our strategy, but we are talking about that more and more, and we're certainly talking about that. We've spent a good year and a half talking, particularly with colleagues in the third sector, voluntary sector groups, where we have the NHS present, university, college, and others. So we've got a really good, healthy group looking at so what does exclusion mean, I suppose, is the starting point. And it was quite stark during the various lockdowns, but as we start to move into the recovery period, it's what does that mean? So we've currently got a survey out there. It's called Let's Talk Digital. I will probably share the link, if you don't mind, with all of you after this meeting, and I might get the guys to push it out on the YouTube channel as well, because the more people that can contribute to that, the better they're in Kirklees. Some of the things we've achieved: got the 2 digital hubs, and over 200 devices have been deployed out to residents in Kirklees. That was done out of the economy side of the council, but again, it's the way we work together that really matters. We've seen some real strength of working between the IT service and other directorates in the council. And the last point is, you know, I'd like to say we've finished off, but I don't know whether we'll ever finish off. We've finished off delivering laptops and Chromebooks to school children. There's around 10,000 out there now. And last year, we also got some funding from Locala, from their CSR kind of budget, which was really quite helpful. So we're now looking at other options, which I'll touch on as on the next slide. The next heading is called Connecting People, Business, Technology. One of the things I'm the team are really proud of is the immersive experience at Cherry Trees. It's a fantastic space that we've developed in partnership with the care home guys, and there's a fantastic video out there on YouTube of how that benefits the residents of Cherry Trees. Openreach have recently announced 10 more digital exchange upgrades in Kirklees, so that will be 12 in total. And you can almost guess that there are 13 digital exchanges in Kirklees. Well, I can come on to the future bit as to why the 13th has been missed. And obviously Virgin Media have upgraded their networks nationally, but also in Kirklees. I believe that work is now concluded. So all of Virgin Media networks is now gigabit capable. It's not necessarily fibre, but it's still gigabit, and it's the fact that the oomph is there, not necessarily the way it's delivered. And obviously City Fibre are continuing building all across Kirklees, and you can find all the data on that. It's all in the public domain when these sites become available, and you can find all of that on Think Broadband. And the last one, and it was a big deal, and we got it over the line just in the nick of time. I was going to have a quick go on. It was we delivered EduRoam across all of our network sites. That's in particular, the kind of focal points might be libraries for education purposes, but the guys at the university were testing it in the leisure centre most of the time in Huddersfield. So wherever you go in a Kirklees building, you can connect to the EduRoam system. So that's all students nationally can connect to that network and get direct access and straight in and get access to their college, university, wherever they go. So that benefits residents of Kirklees. That benefits people who are temporarily here as students, and that I think that's an indication of the strength of working in partnership across the place. And the last one, under class leading internet services, we've continued to deliver rapid responses, and the team have done some amazing work over the last 2 years, but it really did continue all the way through in terms of responses to the pandemic. It's been great stuff. Second but last point on my slide here is we've just launched direct debit payments for garden waste. Again, it's an important building block in terms of some of those bigger strategies of the council. And the last one is we've just delivered some internet services for our dispersed workforce, because quite often we take it for granted that we can all access this stuff because we use these tools to do our job, but our dispersed workers don't have the same tools. So it's really important that we put an internet-based presence out there for them. Okay. Shall I pause or shall I finish my last slide? Because I'm talking about what's next, Chair.
Yeah, let's open it up for maybe a quick round of questions on what's been done, which is really amazing and encouraging. That keeps everything ticking along. So, any observations or questions from members of the panel? Charles Greaves.
Yeah. Hi, Terence. Could you tell us what the 13th hub is? The location of that one?
Okay. The 13th place is Denby Dale, unfortunately, and it's one of those places that we've always struggled to connect because of its geography and all that kind of stuff. But interestingly, UK Gov and DCMS put funding towards getting Denby Dale lit up, to use the language, and we're waiting for that funding to be released and those processes to start. But we are obviously working with Wicker on that, because it is a combined authority piece of work. That is due to commence at some point this year, I believe, but it is a case of just nailing when that procurement process will start, when that money will be released, and then when we'll actually be building in earnest in Denby Dale.
So is that the Denby Dale exchange?
I think it's in Sisset.
Do you know roughly? Does that serve Shepley and Shelley as well? Do you know?
Shepley's done. Shepley was already lit up. Flockton and Shepley were both lit up some time ago. So a lot of that is filled in. So if you get to the top of the hill, to the Sovereign, is it the Sovereign at the top of the hill? That's lit. And stuff out towards Shepley's lit. So even parts of Upper Cumberworth are lit up. But then when you get down into the valleys, what DCNS call the Dern Valley, that it's all that area, which is probably the hard to reach stuff. Because obviously they also need to make sure they triangulate all of the network connectivity for resilience and stuff. So when from an outsider looking in, they probably think we're as close to Barnsley or Penistone than we are to anywhere else in Kirklees. It's just one of those geographic things.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up. You'd mentioned about setting up the direct debit system for garden waste, but the technology solution is fine. I helped one of our residents do it online, but the issue with all of this is for people who can't do it themselves and don't have somebody to help. So the reason I helped the gentleman do it is because in the letter that he'd got with the contact details he'd been given, he'd phoned a few times and spent quite a period of time on the phone, but not being able to get through. So whilst we have these streamlined online processes, we do still need to think about everybody who's not online. And whilst we say we make provision for them, in this particular example, I'm not really sure how robust that was. Is that something you could shed some light on?
I will need to come back to that, because on the next slide, we are talking about the really important link into the access strategy. So I mean, I can talk to Dave Thompson offline about that and pick that point up, because it's really important for us. It's no good just creating pure IT solutions that work. They've got to work for everyone who interacts with them, whether they're phoning Kirklees direct, or whether they're just walking into one of our customer contact centres, or in the future they might be just walking into a community setting where those services will hopefully become available when we start moving that strategy further on. But yeah, I'll pick that point up and I'll take that away.
Thank you. And one final question. Could you just give us just a brief overview of how you deal with a cyber attack and what kind of resources that takes and what kind of impact it can have?
You're at liberty to say no, Terence.
Would you mind if I take that conversation offline, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it is, yeah, the detail of it. Yeah, I would rather not talk about it in public.
Yeah. If he told you, he'd have to kill you and there'd be a violence.
I'd have to delete the. I'd have to delete the video off YouTube. I still have access.
Okay. Right. Okay. Now over to next steps, Terence.
Next step. So the plans, and these are loose plans. They're quite fluid, but these are kind of our focus areas for the next 12 months. So under the getting the basics right part of the strategy, we are looking at developing I suppose it's an improved people-centered service delivery model. So I've had comments quite a lot over the last 24 months from people who've recently joined Kirklees Council. They say it's a really great experience when they call us, but we do need to make sure we just keep improving that level of service and not rest on our laurels. And we're certainly looking at as we recover the council, how do we work differently? So how do we get the best of the technology and we get more modern working spaces, meeting spaces, and all that kind of stuff? But again, it goes into the so how do you then take that as much into a place-based setting, so it isn't all just about Huddersfield and Dewsbury and so on. On the next heading, under the resilient and available infrastructure, we are going to start delivering some changes to the way our network is designed, which we want to kind of move away from some of the old thinking and some of those old methodologies that we've adopted in the past, and move into a new space around the way you kind of almost make networks invisible, and you don't even have to think about it, and make it more about the way you define things at a software level. It's quite high tech stuff. I don't necessarily understand it, but it's where we need to move towards to be able to fluidly change the way we can operate and offer new services into new places. And obviously the other part of that, the fundamental building block, is that we do the network contract that we have that's was awarded to a company called EasyNet 7.5 years ago. They are now called GTT. That's part of the reason that City Fibre came to Kirklees. Was a big part of the reason why City Fibre came to Kirklees. And we need to kind of refresh that network and renew that network. So that's something that will start in terms of going to the market this financial year. In terms of the applications, yeah, loads of major system replacements. Yeah, we'll be on with the housing and adult social care systems. We're looking at legal casework system, court bundling, learning management system, to name but a few. And then the other part of it, again, it goes back to the underpinning some of the more strategic outcomes of the council is around asset management and maintenance systems. That's both in housing and in operational services. So under the data and security stuff, from a security point of view, we're looking at it partly answers Charles's question in terms of the starting point of what happens when something goes wrong. We're actually going to be looking at commissioning a security operations centre. So you'll actually have people working 24/7 on our behalf, analysing everything that's going on our network, and then looking at how that lines up to the current threats. So instead of us trying to make sure that we try and do it inside out, which we do reasonably well at, it's commissioning that differently and having professionals do that outside of the council. And we look at what we do in terms of dealing with the aftermath if something was to go wrong. And obviously, I mean, a few years ago we did actually have a 0-day attack, and we did lose quite a lot of data, but thankfully we recovered it all. So you know, it's not necessarily always about saying you can stop these things, because you can't, because even big businesses can't. It's being able to respond to it if it were to happen. Hence why we're looking at the way we back up data and so on and so forth. In terms of the data heading, and this is probably the first entry point for you know, what's going to be the big deal next time, is you know, it's around the Yorkshire Number Care Record. It's about sharing data between the NHS, social care and the like. So for me, what really will start to shift next year is the formation of the ICS, and the way that the council will play a different role. And obviously quite a lot of the things that we'll do with the ICS will be underpinned by digital services. So we need to be really clear about how we do that. And you know, that is a big deal, and it starts cutting across some of the next headings as well. So in terms of the inclusive technology and skills, we really want to look at the outcomes of the Let's Talk Digital survey, and we also want to capture what are the stories now in our communities. The stories were easy to find during the various lockdowns. So whether it was delivering Facebook portals into care homes 2 years ago, or through to giving laptops to kids and so on and so forth, it's the what are the stories, what's going to make the difference. So picking up Charles's point a moment ago, so how do we help real people in real places, and not just say, well, here's your web form, fill it in, because that's not how we want to do business. The next line is around creating more community-based learning opportunities. So you know, we've done quite a few laptop and resource loan type activities. How do we kind of look at how we do that more often and in the right places? I think that is building on the outcome of the survey. And there's also a bit around our own staff. So how do we actually help our own staff develop their digital skills? We've also got a survey out with the NHS at the moment. Well, it's funded by the NHS, it's with care homes. So we're looking at what skill levels do we have in our private sector care homes. There's around 130 of them, and we're trying to find out what do they have. We need to know what skills they have, what IT systems they have, if any, because most probably don't, and also what technology they have to actually run their care homes. So again, it feeds back into the story around the care record. There's no point having a care record that's purely perfect if it actually gives no benefit to people. In terms of the connecting people thing, I've touched on in the answer around the Project Gigabit. So Project Gigabit will be there to fund the ultra-fast connectivity into Denby Dale. We really do want to look as part of that network piece around how could we deliver more services into communities, so the actual council helps deliver those services. And the last part of that story, and you know, I'm hoping we'll get some funding from the NHS on this one, is around looking at more assistive technology in some of those care settings. Certainly within the council, we've got the capital funding to finish off the modernisation of our own care homes, and we're looking at assistive technology in care homes and in people's personal homes, because in looking at the calendar, it's 3 years now when Openreach will finally turn off pulse and copper telephone technology. So we need to refresh that technology as well. But that works underway. And then last but not least, again, under class leading internet services, one of the first things we've got to do tactically is we are actually replacing our contact center platform. So from a tactical point of view, we're just going to replace it because we're in a position where we have to, because the company we've traded with for some time has been bought out by somebody who's been bought out by somebody else, and they don't want to continue supporting the product. So we're in a position where we need to do some tactical work. But again, picking up Charles' point, so how do you then strategically start thinking around how do you make sure your face-to-face and your telephony services are as well invested in as your digital services to make sure you get the benefits across the board. Another mention around the ICS there, it will be a big deal around pushing services out there, especially to those private sector care homes. And again, it's what's our role as a council to support those care homes, because ultimately they're all our residents. So what do? We don't just sit back and hope for the best. It's make sure we work in partnership with the NHS, third sector as well. And last but not least, we're looking at a business account for businesses in Kirklees and refreshing that. And I think that's me done. But I would like to just finish off by saying, you know, what I've really been impressed with over the last 12 months, and I'm hoping, and it will definitely continue for in the future as well, is how fantastic the IT team have been and how resilient they've been over that period of time. So I want to personally say thank you to all of them, and certainly some of the work that we've done across sector as well. You know, we've had some fantastic interactions with the voluntary sector groups and with the university. So it's been a great year. Long may it continue. I've got 3 hands now.
That's great. Thanks, Terence. And yeah, my thanks as well. I'm sure everybody's thanks for keeping the show on the road. It's been amazing and kept things going. So kick off with Philip Charleno.
Thank you, Chair. So the phenomenal amount of work you've been doing, which is brilliant. I suppose it still have these two areas of concern. One is there are still those families or individuals who are living, I might say, in poverty in areas where they're struggling to you know, whether to put money in an electricity meter or to eat or whatever, and they probably haven't even got access to the internet, and how they may be catered for. And that might be a dwindling number, perhaps in Kirklees, but I don't know. And the other thing is that with the phasing out of the traditional open telephone system, which is Pulse thing, it will all be dependent upon internet connections. Now, internet connections require power. I've now got somebody in the house, say, who, in an elderly person, my landline telephone doesn't work anymore because it's not there. I've got internet, but there's no power. How can I seek help? And that's taking the cell tower down just across the road as well, by the way. So.
Oh well, if you're taking the cell tower out as well, then you've made it quite difficult.
That happened here in Slough not so long ago, actually.
Yeah, when I'm at home in Huddersfield, my mobile phone reception is absolutely appalling. But where I am today, it's very good because I'm actually in Scotland. So, yeah, it's important, and it's certainly something we're considering. So certainly in the 2 care homes that we've refreshed, there is a huge amount of resilience in there, and it's, you know, these systems will be backed off by 4G and so on. So, you know, those towers normally are resilient as well, so they do have power backup, because, you know, we all know that they do need to be up and available. So, you know, at that point, from that kind of corporate service level, you know, that's what we do. But certainly into individuals' homes, that's part of the conversation. So a lot of the technologies that is going in is actually mobile technology. So it's all 4G and 3G backed. But yeah, it's a valid point, and probably one to pick up with OpenReach. But you know, all we can do is build based on what we know, and hopefully we will build resilience in wherever we possibly can, because we don't want people in a position where they cannot be connected. I suppose my personal fear is, because I've not gone through this yet, because I've upgraded both my homes to full fibre, but I don't use a telephone. I've not used a landline telephone for about 35 years. So you know, I do rely on my mobile phone. But you know, at the end of the day, it's not cheap either. I mean, when you're talking about fuel poverty and all that kind of stuff, it's, you know, which one will you pick? And I suppose when it comes back to our strategy, that's why I think what's really important is for us to push our services further into community settings. So it isn't necessarily just a council asset we might put something into. It might be into a community group setting, and where people can reasonably walk to be able to not just transact with the council, but also just do things that we take for granted. So online banking, as a for example, all of these things that are just important. You know, getting your food shop sorted and so on. So how do we do that, and how do we do that working in partnership with the voluntary sector? Because I think if we just do it alone, we're not going to be successful.
Thank you for that. I guess because there are no telephone boxes these days either. So, so even if the technology was there in those boxes, it wouldn't. You'd have to go a long way to find a phone outside, as it were.
Yeah, yeah. I'm one of those weird people. I actually believe that your home Wi-Fi. I don't think you should put a password on, but I might get shot by one of my security team for saying that, because it should just be, you should be able to get access to a wireless network somewhere close to where you live. That should be how we do things. But where there's money to be made, people will make money out of it.
Thank you.
Right, thanks for that. Now we'll move to James Homewood.
Yeah, it was just so there's been the strategy. One of the things that's just unclear to me is a little bit around how all the kind of applications and services we have sort of speak to one another. So we've kind of received a lot of strategies from the council about how, I think what you kind of mentioned about things being people-centric and place-based working, and things being able to be dealt with by the first colleague who identifies the issue, etc. And so what I'm still unclear is, do we have a strategy to have a system and application that deals with kind of all or most types of queries that come and complaints that come from residents? So for example, if I'm speaking to someone in the council about a housing query, they can actually see, oh yeah, you've also reported a number of issues with missed bin collections or with fly tipping outside your house, etc. Because at the moment, what I pick up is that people can't do that, and so there's no option but them to pass queries and issues off to different teams, and everything being done by email, residents getting different reference numbers and things like that. And that seems to me to be a kind of key technological strategy to actually be able to deliver the kind of wider strategies that we're saying we're going to deliver. And I'm still not sure whether that's happening. Now, I appreciated some of the stuff you talked about, like adult social care, and obviously there's certain things which are highly confidential and specialist and will need their own applications, of course, and that data couldn't be shared necessarily. But is there something we're doing that? Because to me, that seems like from a strategy perspective, that seems like what we're needing to be doing. Otherwise, how can we deliver all these other strategies that we've got in place? Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, James. I'll probably answer that by saying this is why it's so critical that we work alongside the customer access strategy, because the building blocks need to be quite clearly defined by their strategic intent, and it's how do we make IT as an enabler of that, rather than just say my starting point is I'll buy a CRM system, because it's a good starting point for a business, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the right starting point for ours. So it's how do you make sure that when you are looking at that strategy and that strategic goals, then what are the enablers that we put in there? Because it could just be about, so as simple as, do we have a golden record to say this James Homewood is you, and this Townsend is me, and then linking that to as data, and then making sure that data is visible depending on what permissions are allowed, and then really is about that kind of starting point around, we still have a very large number of people who want to contact us by telephone or face to face, and those are the kinds of people who are more likely to be kind of offering those more complex issues, because I am talking to people getting bounced around and so on. So the starting point is the access strategy. One of those building blocks will be when we go to market for the new telephony system, because within that you'll have that functionality start bringing that information together. So when you talk to somebody either face to face or over the telephone in the contact centre, you can start making sure that that information is being surfaced to the people that you're talking to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it doesn't. And the contact strategy, yeah, that's what I was thinking of in terms of the strategy, which I couldn't think what it's called.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I understand what you're saying, because when we ask questions around the contact strategy, I was asking the same question around how would that actually happen in practice, and I wasn't sure that I understood the answer to that, because surely, you know, it's not about the phone system, is it? It's going to be about the system of which those types of requests are being recorded and logged on. And at the moment, as far as I can see, if you go through to say environmental health, that'll be on some application or system or paper form or who knows what, that somebody else in fly tipping report won't have access to. So like how that surely is the critical point in terms of technology strategy to actually deliver that contact strategy. And I hadn't heard anything that really confirmed to me that was going to be taking place. Anyway, thank you.
Well, at the moment, like I say, from a tactical point of view, we're buying a new system, but then it really is around what are those building blocks? Because what we talked about, and it's only just quite recent, is you don't just go to market to buy a telephony system. It's got to be much broader than that. It's got to encompass all of those things that you've just referenced there. And how do you make that? Because it doesn't, just because it's an IT system that in one area it might be used for answering the phone. We could, we've seen systems where you can then use exactly the same technology on the website. You could use exactly the same technology in the face-to-face settings. So then you're starting to build that record of who our people are. Because I don't necessarily like using the term customer, and I certainly don't like using the term CRM, because that's what the private sector do to create sales. It's how do we make sure we bring all of that information together, and then part of that access strategy is then use that information when you're in contact with those residents. Hope that helps. But it's certainly something we're looking at, and it's certainly one of the areas we're looking at is actually getting some external advice on that as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Greaves next. Just a reminder that we have 4 items on the agenda today.
All right. Yeah.
So we're aiming to finish by midday.
Items.
Okay. Councillor Greaves.
So one of the things I'd just like to query is when we and I'm really not IT at all, so forgive me if this is. But when you set up the web pages, is there a different setup for mobile phone usage? Are they optimized for both? Is there a way that we know which way to send somebody? Because I struggle sometimes on my mobile phone to see all of the details. And just picking up from Philip's point, quite often we might have people who are struggling financially who will have an internet-enabled phone. So that might be their only way of accessing digital services. So they might not have a PC or a laptop. It might just be through the phone. So is everything geared up to work well, however, whatever piece of equipment you're using?
Yes. I'm worried about the chair counting me out, but no, of course. We have a what's called a responsive design. So the website is designed for a laptop in the first instance, but we're more likely to be designing pages, so they do work on the mobile phone. So for example, if you use the Kirklees software on the web, it works on your laptop fine, but it also works fine on your mobile phone too. And it's something the team do work hard at. And the other part of that, I mean, we haven't necessarily done the whole website, but we've done quite all of the important stuff. And the other part of it is around accessibility. So we've got accessibility legislation, and we are working through the website again as well to make sure our website is accessible, because quite often we get the comments back, oh, it looks a bit boring. But but at the end of the day, boring might be your take on it, but it's the other part. The important part is it accessible? Could a screen reader read it, and so on and so forth. So we've got a quite important piece of work in train, and we are quite highly rated in terms of our accessibility, and it's something that we keep needing to push on, because the kind of difficult areas when you start getting into documents like Word docs and PDFs and stuff like that, because sometimes they're quite difficult to deal with, but the web content absolutely works on the phone. It's accessible, and we have some transactions on Amazon and Alexa as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Davies.
Yep. Thanks, Terence. You beat me to it by thanking your team, so I was going to get in there as well. But I think fantastic job as well. When I joined 3 years ago, I think I've said this to you already. Hugely impressed in the way that IT got me up and running very quickly. I've worked in the IT. I did work in the IT services sector for 2 global companies for 18 years. I can tell you, never had that service from either of those companies, a French and an American company. I think what you've managed to do, clearly, as you've outlined during the pandemic, has really helped us start to transform how we work. And again, that's really impressive. And it's, you know, the responsiveness that certainly I found, and I know other people have found from the team has been great. I think the thing I wanted to point out, and you've talked about it with great passion, and we've talked about it anyway, the two of us, is your outlook in terms of the inclusive nature of what we do, not just into, well, it's not just internally, but the inclusive nature of working outwards and looking outwards. And I know that there's a determination from you to drive that forward, and certainly got my full support in that. And of course, that's not easy, but I do think a lot of the comments have been made, you know, absolutely link up to the access strategy, to the work that Dave Thompson's doing, and certainly from my perspective, the work we need to continue doing in making our assets more accessible to the community, working, as you said, Terence, with other bodies within the community to create that ability for people to get that easy access, and particularly, as people have pointed out, for those who we've used in the past the term digital poverty, but just simply not even digital poverty, just people being uncomfortable with using that approach. And certainly that is, I can assure the committee, that is absolutely part of what we are doing with our libraries. It's part of what we do when we look at how we work with the third sector going forward. So you know, there is alignment there, and that work will continue to go forward. And Dave Thompson certainly is very much driving that in terms of putting together the new system going forward for people to contact us. And Terence is right, we have a huge number of people contact us by telephone. I'm always amazed. Just a comment on something that James raised about you know, bringing together the systems. Again, having worked in the sector for a while, I worked for CSC, who were one of the major contractors for the famous NHS integrated system that never really truly became an integrated system, and that was going to do everything. And you know, you could be in South Wales and access your record. Somebody could access your records in wherever, well, let's say in Fife or somewhere, and that spend was billions and billions and billions, and has never ever achieved what it was set out. A point I'm making is, I think sometimes, as Terence knows, these are quite complex issues. I absolutely agree with the approach of bringing that sort of account approach, where we have accounts and therefore people can access the accounts. But we are a complex organisation, and within that complexity, there are whole sets of issues in terms of what information we can share, not share, how we do that. You know, and I was just thinking when you're talking about that, I'm an EE customer. So when I ring up EE or I contact EE and I want to talk my broadband, I talk my broadband, but they can't talk to me about my mobile phone account. So we have a major supplier that absolutely splits that up. There isn't that connectivity as well. So, you know, not making excuses, but certainly we're not alone in that. So, but I would agree, it's a key thing for us to crack going forward. But I think even more importantly is how we connect within the community and how we enable people to have that face-to-face connection with officers as well. So, you know, we're certainly continuing to work on how we bring the council back into our communities, and that's part of our overall approach. But Terence, fantastic team, doing a great job. And I think a few years ago, none of us would have thought that we'd be able to work in such an efficient manner, both in hybrid, face-to-face, and purely online. So, Brill, thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you. Yeah, appreciate the comment. I think one thing I'll leave us with now is Andy Simcox has made the point that this is a 5-year strategy and that we could well come back to this again. And I think going forward, I think we should be looking at putting on the work plan going forward for the scrutiny panel. And so I'll ask if we can ensure it's on the forward plan so we can review it probably in about a year or so's time. Okay, thank you everybody. We'll then, much appreciated. We'll now move on to the next item. So that is, just get my agenda up on the screen. That will be the people strategy, I think. Yep, people strategy. So,
yep.
Deborah.
Super. Okay, thanks
Deborah.
and morning all. And I am conscious of time, and I know you've had quite a detailed report on this, so we'll try and be brief in talking around it. So it was to come here today just to give you an update where we're at with the people strategy, and also because this is a hot topic of conversation at the moment, some of the recruitment and retention challenges that we are having. So we have recently relaunched launched a refreshed people strategy. The plan was always to do this in 2021, but obviously the pandemic arrived and it did push us back with some of the work that we were doing. However, I think reflecting on it, it actually was a good thing because the pandemic taught us so much and we learned so much from what happened in the pandemic. So it really informed the refresh of the people strategy. So it was actually helpful in the work that we were doing because the world of work has completely transformed as a result of the pandemic. So you'll see from the report that I've pulled together that we've got a vision around the people strategy. We've got 4 key outcomes and we've got our values and behaviours at the heart of the people strategy. What we're really keen to do is to keep that strategy very much alive, and what we've got what we call pledges. So they're things where the pledges that support the outcomes of the people strategy, and that's keeping it alive through things like storytelling, through videos, through case studies. So we'll regularly keep communicating these outwardly to our workforce over the life of the people strategy. And it's things like, so we've already launched a careers site. We've developed a gender identity pledge, and we're looking at we're working with the carers network to develop a pledge around how we're supporting our working carers. So lots of kind of activities going on, like I say, to just keep it alive in people's minds. What's sitting behind the people strategy is a hugely ambitious programme of work that we've got. And what we found during the pandemic was that programme of work was kind of creeping and growing and getting more and more and more. So back last September, given the scale of the work that was underway, we undertook a programme assurance piece so that we could rationalise and prioritise some of the projects and some of the activities so that we could maximise impact really around what we were doing, because like I say, the work was just growing and growing. We also took that opportunity back last year to review and strengthen the governance. And again, you can see that there's a slide in the pack of information where you can see what that governance looks like. So just in terms of that programme of work, you'll see from appendices 3 and 4 all the detail. You'll see a breakdown of the projects and the different phases of those projects, and in paragraph 2.3 of my report you've got an update on some of those key projects. Again, I'm not going to go through them all today because there's not enough time, but there's just a few that I would probably pick out that I feel are really critical for us as an organisation. So one of the biggest ones, and obviously it touches on what I mentioned at the beginning, is workforce planning. It's absolutely essential that we have a big programme of work around workforce planning, and that project will ensure that we truly embed workforce planning across the council going forward. We're currently piloting workshops in critical service areas where we know we've got difficulties in things like recruitment retention, in succession planning. So we're prioritising those areas. And we're using kind of a suite of support documents, very much intelligence led. We've got manager intelligence dashboards that we're using to help managers understand what their workforce currently looks like, and then identify where the gaps might be in terms of the plan going forward. So like I said, that's a really critical piece of work, and we'll be rolling that out across the organisation over the next few months. Another critical piece of work is our Myspace project, and this very much links into the technology strategy that Terence was just talking about. And this is about us digitally enabling our frontline workforce primarily, because one of the big things that the pandemic taught us, it's always been hard to engage with our frontline workforce, but that really came to the fore during the pandemic. So we really kind of prioritised this project. And what Myspace is it's an online portal that our workforce can access through any digital device that they have, and it enables them to look at things like their pay, the benefits, well-being, support, development opportunities, jobs, council messages, all the things that kind of online stuff that we can see on the intranet. But it was about engaging our frontline workforce and giving them that support as well. And we've currently rolled that out to about 2,700 frontline workers. We've also got, sorry, and that's, like I said, that's very much linked into the digitally upskilling our workforce as well, which, like I say, aligns to the work that Terence has been talking about. We've also got a TimeWise project that's looking at putting flexibility into our roles, again, in particular our frontline roles, and that will really support us with workforce retention and recruitment issues. Again, the pandemic, as I said at the beginning, it's really changed the world of work. And whereas previously flexibility might have been seen as a benefit, it's now seen as an essential, and candidates are just looking automatically to see flexibility in jobs. So we have to ensure that we embrace that across all our roles. The final project I want to touch on is Project Search. So a really successful project which supports young people with learning disabilities and autism into employment. So we're working in, and this is a really great partnership with Project Search, with the college, and with Real Employment, and obviously the council's hosting this, where we've got young people with learning disabilities and autism in placements with us, and looking to, we then will look to find them a pathway into employment. So that's a really successful project. And actually we had one of our interns came along to Personnel Committee last week to talk about his experience. And I know Councillor Davies and also Councillor Taylor were there. And again, really successful. So that's something I think we should be really proud of. My report then goes on in section 3 to reference some of the challenges that we're facing around recruitment and retention. And again, we've had a number of Personnel Committee meetings over the past months where we've discussed these challenges at length and some of the solutions that we might put in place. And I would probably say these are not Kirklees challenges. They're not just our challenges. They're national challenges. And you'll be aware there's a national skills shortage. There's a lot of economic inactivity that we've seen as we're coming out of the pandemic, and we've got pay challenges again at a national level as well. So whilst some of these are reflecting in what we're seeing in our workforce, so we are seeing an increase in labour turnover, we are seeing an increase in the number of people retiring, probably earlier than they may well have retired, but we are also seeing some sort of green shoots, such as the number of vacancies that we've got. We are seeing those reducing, and we are also seeing, because we have undertaken a lot of recruitment, we are also starting to see a shift in how our workforce looks, and moving to a younger cohort of workers now. So again, like I say, we're seeing some green shoots there, but the challenges are not insignificant and they continue. And in section 3.6 of my report, again, I've gone into some of the detail about the actions we've put in place to address things like hard to fill roles in areas in particular around highways, engineering, adult social care, adult social work. And we're also doing a lot of work to develop pathways into employment. Again, Project Search is just one of those, and creating a talent pool for the future, as well as we're looking at reviewing levels of remuneration and doing some work with our local communities to target recruitment from our local communities as well, targeting doing some recruitment events. So I think that's kind of a very brief overview of the people strategy and where we're at with some of the challenges. I think we'd really welcome your challenge, your support, your feedback, any questions, and any ideas where we might be able to improve or do things differently. And I'd also highlight, so I've got Michelle Moss has joined us today. So Michelle, she sort of leads on the operational delivery of a lot of these pieces. So thought it's helpful for Michelle to be here too. And yeah, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really appreciated. First up, out of the traps is Philip Charleno.
Well, thank you very much for that. And it's quite a complicated area, isn't it, really? But what I've said two things, separate things probably. One is you mentioned the current turnover about 9.1%. I can't remember what it was prior to the pandemic, but has it changed in its nature at all, as well as the quantity? So
prior to the pandemic, it was roughly where it is now. But what we did see during the pandemic was it dropped to around about 7%. So we did see people were not really moving on during the pandemic, and that's quite understandable. So we are seeing it roughly where it was pre-pandemic. But like I say, what we are seeing is we're seeing a number of people coming forward and saying, I want to retire, I want to retire. So I think what we're anticipating is it's going to be an upward trajectory.
It's demographic pressure,
Yeah. What I would add is, on average, the national average, if you take into account all organisations, is around about 14%. That's what you would normally see in an organisation. So we are low. We're not in any kind of crisis position in terms of people leaving, because we're way below that. But for us, it's roughly about 9%. But like I say, I think we're going to see that go up.
Okay. And the other bit was around wellbeing champions, and you've been developing that. And I think when I sort of introduced to that, was 3 years ago or something like that, it seemed to be quite a positive thing to do. And I'm just wondering, do people have confidential online access to a champion if they really need that support?
So not currently. So that's something. So to date, we've always had our wellbeing champions, but it's very much been kind of on an informal basis. And I think that's why we wanted to put it into a proper project where we could make sure that the champions were getting the development that they need, that we've got standards in place and expectations. Because I think sometimes, wellbeing champions, they're almost a victim of their own success, and people will go and they almost take on a bit too much. And obviously we want to make sure that we protect our champions and we make sure that people are getting the right support from the right place, because the champions are there to guide and signpost and things like that. They're not there necessarily to deal with issues. So absolutely, that is part of the development of the Wellbeing Champions Network, that we will be formalising things like that, how people access the champions, and indeed what support the champions are able to give.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Homewood.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just linking together sort of the hard to fill roles and then the workforce development and some of the apprenticeships and stuff that we have, because you're looking at the sort of the ones around highways engineering, adult social work. I'm guessing those are roles that require degree level qualifications or master's level qualifications and things like that in some respects. So is any of what we're doing there linked into that? So is there ways that we can support our existing colleagues, for example, to retrain as a social worker, for example, if we think that they have that skill? Because I'm guessing that particularly for like mature students and things, there's an issue around cost and time to be able to actually study. Do we allow people to work part-time so they can retrain through workforce development? Because obviously I'm presuming like a lot of the online tools and assessments will help potentially people to develop and progress to certain roles, but then some of these hard to fill ones, I guess, are needing those specialist qualifications, which take longer to provide. And I just wondered if, in terms of a long-term development plan for some colleagues, whether that is a possibility. And I didn't know whether the apprenticeships linked into any of those roles, or actually where we've got apprenticeships, or those types of roles we're actually being able to fill more successfully and replace as people move on.
Do you want me to
Okay,
answer,
thanks.
Deborah?
I was going to say I'll hand over to Michelle because Michelle, Michelle is our resident expert on this.
So I'll take them both separately if that's okay, Councillor Homewood. So social workers, we have really strong, really well established links with the university and our teaching partnership. So we've got really strong links with Huddersfield University, York University. So really offering those placements as people are doing their qualifications in Kirklees really helps us with that strong pipeline into Kirklees. We have done social work apprenticeships in the past. I think the first cohort are kind of coming to the conclusion at the moment, so that's something that we really want to kind of have another look at, see whether there is any more mileage in those ones. As you've seen, we've had both children's and adult social work issues. Adults is the one where it's a little bit trickier at the moment, and very much how can we retain, so we can bring people in through that newly qualified route, and what we really need to focus on is retaining people as well. But absolutely the social work apprenticeship is very much on our radar, as making sure we continue to look at that and what opportunities that brings us. In terms of highways, absolutely, again, those ones, and where we have, it is a really tricky area, but where we have most success is when we've got a really strong track record of growing our own in those areas. So our apprenticeships that are advertised at the moment, we've got lots of kind of highways engineering type roles in those apprenticeships that are coming through. We're also looking at the higher level apprenticeships, which is something that we've perhaps not used quite so much before, so less traditional, but as kind of supporting those people that we are trying to grow. How can we support them into those higher levels of qualification in highways? And something that's really exciting that we're looking at the moment is working with the Department of Education. They're rolling out the new T-level qualifications, so we're looking at being as one of those trailblazer schemes, working with Kirklees College to develop that T-level, and engineering is one of those areas. That's the area that we want to focus on, so that we're really looking forward to that. And I think what that means is some of our staff can go and be like guest lecturers and things. So I think that's a really good example of how we can help kind of get to the fore of some of those national developments, and something we can build on.
That's good. Just one quick follow-up. It was just on the apprenticeships. Are they open to people who already work for the council as well? And do you know how that works? I'm just wondering, for example, do we support people to do apprenticeships who work for us, like, where there might be an issue around income, like would they receive a cut in pay, for example, if they went onto apprenticeship? But is that one way of helping develop existing workforce? So
for the development type apprenticeships, that would be, so if you were in a role and developing in your role to kind of help you move up in your role, those are ones that are funded through the apprenticeship levy, and you'd continue in your same role and do the qualification at the same time. Some of the I suppose the ones that we know traditionally is, so the entry level apprenticeships, those are kind of, I suppose, apprenticeship jobs, so those come as with the apprenticeship rate of pay with the ones, but I think the ones that you're talking about are those development level ones, which would be kind of supported whilst you're in your current role to do those.
Great, thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Davies, more than happy to have input from the cabinet member. If you can keep it relatively brief, please.
I will be awesome. Very brief. Couple of key points. I think what's come out of this is the strength of programme management in enabling the people strategy to actually achieve outcomes, and I think there's lessons certainly I think from within my portfolio to be learned from that. So that's absolutely made a huge difference. That rigour. In terms of the issues that that was mentioned around resignations, I think just to we need to be aware that around the people deciding to take early retirement, clearly there'll be a hit on our senior levels within the organisation as well. And so Deborah and the team are working very hard with the executive team in developing succession planning. So there is a lot of proactive work going on at the moment so that we can look at internal development. We're clearly probably not going to fit all the potential gaps through that, but there's a real effort being put into that area. I think the other thing, just a very small one to mention, is the job fairs that we've been looking at and working at, like job fairs, whatever we call them now, but getting out there and recruiting the communities. something Deborah and the team have been working on is how can we get out there and actually make it easier for people to join us, and basically instead of going through a very long-winded recruitment processes, hopefully we can get to a point where for some roles we can actually recruit on the ground with people there and take them through that interview process, and obviously there'll still be final checks after that. So there's some real effort being put into making it far more accessible, particularly for parts of Kirklees which may feel that they perhaps haven't got the confidence. If you think of people, individuals in that area may not have the confidence to apply through our online systems, etc. So that was it, really. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Comment from me, Deborah, and that's we seem to have a lot of systemic vacancies, I think you might call them, in highways. They seem to. It seems to be an area which is a hard nut to crack. Some of that is due to the private sector pay and the options that that people working in that highway sector, highways engineers, have got other options. It seems a hard nut to crack, and it's a frustration for me because of all the highways issues that that I raise with the highways service. So I wonder about your thoughts on that. One of the thoughts I really wonder about is whether this could be something that could be dealt with at a regional level, and whether there is a collaboration with other councils who we should not necessarily regard as competitors, but maybe collaborators in building up with the sector, and also possibly the West Yorkshire Mayor in terms of building up a skills hub for things like highways engineering, and growing our own in terms of people who can work in this sector. So I'll throw that in for thought.
Okay, so I think certainly there's definitely something in the collaboration, and we've already done some work collaboratively around children's social workers, and we're looking at what we might do around adult social workers, again, because it's almost people will jump around. So somebody has an issue, and social workers, for example, might move to that authority, and we're almost just we're pinching from each other continuously in that, and that just can't be right. And then that drives sort of pay levels up, and we see some of that going on. So certainly around children's social workers, we had a regional memorandum of understanding around how we work together, and we're looking at something similar around adult social workers. I think in terms of the challenges, Michelle's already responded to some of the stuff around highways and engineers, and I think one of the things that we're also looking at is around pay levels, you know, and around is there anything we can do around that? So doing some benchmarking, checking out that we are in line certainly with our neighbours in the market. And I know we have put in place some market rate supplements in those areas, but that is certainly something that we are looking at. You know, is pay a factor? Is there anything we can do about pay? Clearly, we're never going to be able to compete with private sector organisations because we've got job evaluation and equal pay and all the rest of it. But it's something that we are looking at. Is there anything we can do further around pay? Michelle, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to any of that, particularly around the highways engineering stuff.
I think it is incredibly, it's the hardest nut to crack. I think it is incredibly difficult, particularly with a lot of that private sector competition. I suppose just to hopefully give some of that reassurance about in terms of that kind of success in growing our own. So highways and a number of those types of jobs that we've talked about today, those ones that are really hard to fill, we're doing a lot of kind of getting in right at the start, so trying to get into schools and kind of colleges and promote those as careers, and that those being careers that are available in Kirklees Council. So our virtual work experience programme that's mentioned in the report that Deborah's put together, pushing some of those careers like highways engineering, or creating those as options for our kind of workforce at the future. So we're kind of we're attacking from every front on the really tough nut to crack, but just hopefully to give you some reassurance that we're not just dealing with the sticking plaster on the current issue. We are trying to work it up in the long term as well.
Okay.
And sorry, I'm just going to come back, and just one thing that struck me there is, as part of workforce planning, I think what we have to recognise is we're not going to keep people forever now. So people there's that constant cycle of people moving on and changing, and we know that younger people these days will have a number of different careers. That's just what the intelligence is telling us. So it's not kind of people come and join us and they stay with us for life now. So I think we have to make sure that we reflect that in our workforce plans, so that we know we are going to get this turnover. And as Michelle says, getting that pipeline in through colleges, through schools, and getting people continuously coming through and growing them, and then accepting that they may well move on because they may move to the private sector or whatever, but making sure that we continue that talent pipeline through is absolutely, that's why workforce planning is so important, such a critical project for us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for the responses. We will now move on to Eamon Cross, who will be telling us about the Council's capital plan and what's going on with that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to introduce Phil to talk through this agenda item even, if that's okay. Phil will introduce it anyway, and then we can sort of collectively bounce off questions. Okay. Discussion.
Good stuff. Okay, Phil.
Right, well, good morning, everybody. So the report provides a brief overview of Q3 monitoring, which was reported to Cabinet on the 8th of March, and the capital plan, just under 1.3 billion, that was approved at Budget Council on the 16th. And there are summaries in the report shown at appendices A to C, but the main focus of the report is the high-level governance process that support the investment plan and ensure compliance with the Council's financial procedure rules. So I was just going to briefly take you through those. It's Council that is responsible for approving the capital investment plan and the prudential indicators, and I'm not going to quote every FPR, but that's in accordance with FPR 3.3. And then Cabinet is responsible for implementing that plan once it's been approved. And then service directors manage those programs and projects and make sure that they control them and avoid overspending. And whilst capital can be quite a bureaucratic process, it's fair to say there's quite a lot of flexibility built into those processes, that people will review them throughout the year. And you can see in the report that because there's quite a lot of risk of material variations in spend profiles, we do review that. And already in 21-22, 74 million of capital has been moved and reprofiled into future years. And conversely, there's also a procedural that allows the Service Director Finance, under his delegated authority, to optimise the funding. And there was an example of that at Q1 of this year, where we built an extra 2.4 million into the capital plan for the street lighting scheme to make sure that we completed the whole inventory of that Investor Save programme. Then quarterly reports are taken through Cabinet to report those movements that I've kind of just described above, and as a method of taking amended capital proposals to Cabinet. Business cases are an integral element of the whole process of planning, governance, approval, etc. And there is a board called the Capital Governance Board that will appraise new proposals for recommendation into the investment plan. And those templates are based on the kind of Treasury 5 case model, the management, financial, commercial, etc. And they require endorsement from the various capital boards and or strategic director to get through that process. The level of detail within a business case is going to be proportionate to the risk and complexity of the project. And there are two real main approval processes in this in that. The first for inclusion in the multi-year plan, which is kind of an in principle approval, and then secondly, when a formal cabinet approval is sought to commence and spend the scheme. And obviously, business cases are much more likely to be more comprehensive and detailed by the time they go for formal approval, due to the fact that in that life cycle, the project development work will be much more advanced. And whilst the capital planning exercise is undertaken, the main part is part of the budget process. We also look at it as part of the year-end exercise, and that offers the opportunity to review project allocations, funding assumptions, and any other emerging priorities. And so the last thing I would just say, I summarised at 2.1.16, any proposals originating from the exercise this year's outturn, which will be kind of May, June time, will need to be considered against updated spending and funding forecasts. So hopefully that just gives a flavour of what the report says.
Okay, thank you. So over to the panel. We have no questions.
Is that a good thing or bad?
So I mean, for me, I mean, I think it seems to show that you're pretty much on schedule with in terms of spend. The variances are not too far off there, from what I can see. So that's a positive. So yeah. Oh, Philip Charleno. Get in. Come on.
It's just I noticed there's quite an increase in capital spend over the next 2 years, and I'm just wondering what the revenue impact of that capital spend will be in terms of the other cost pressures on the council, because capital doesn't go as capital; it has a revenue impact, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, so the two main elements of the financing charges is paying back the principal and obviously paying the interest from having borrowed it if you haven't used your own resources. I don't know the exact figure in millions of pounds, but I can't remember if I threw it into the report, but there is a prudential indicator. So obviously that's a huge thing about making sure it's sustainable and affordable for the council. And one of the key prudential indicators that they use is how much is the council spending on covering its debt as a proportion of the monies that the council has to spend elsewhere. It's called the net revenue stream, and that's projected to be, I think, by year 5 at just under 12, or around 12%. It's currently just under 10%. So another way of viewing that is 10 pence in every pound is currently spent on this, and we are anticipating if we deliver that capital plan, that will raise to 12.
Okay, well, I guess some indication. It's just that I'm not quite sure what the future holds in terms of budget, and I'm no longer going to be on the scrutiny for this, so I probably won't see the figures quite so easily. But I always worry about revenue pressures, to be honest.
Okay, so thanks for that. That was just an update anyway, so we appreciate you coming to us with that. Next agenda item is Councillor Paul Davies, who is going to tell us about progress on his corporate priorities.
Okay,
so you can
thanks, Chair.
tell us the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. It's fine, you're among friends.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk to this and just give a verbal update. So there's I'm not going to put up slides or run through anything in that regard. I think first of all, focus on certainly the completed deliverables, and we have one of the priorities was to put in place a procurement strategy, and we have developed the first draft of that. Currently discussing that with Head of Procurement Jane Lockwood, and that will go through various discussions clearly before we fine-tune that and then discuss that more broadly. So the first draft has been delivered in line with what the timescale that we said, and also we talked about this earlier. Actually, the access to service strategy, certainly that strategy is in place. That's been now discussed publicly. There's clearly the difficult part of this. It's not easy putting a strategy in place, but the most difficult thing is delivering on that, and I'll refer to that a little bit later on. So those are two key areas that we've delivered on. We're going to talk informally later on, I know, about comms. So I won't spend a lot of time talking through comms, but I'll just mention a couple of things on that. Clearly, the thing we're going to talk about informally later is around the communication strategy. And that is being worked on. As I said, later on, Marcus will take us through more detail on that. So that is developing, very much in the way in which I believe is the right approach. And I know that Marcus is going to talk a lot about how we create the right conversations, the right approaches. In terms of Another related objective is around demonstrating evidence of increased reach, engagement with the council's between the council and citizens. And again, this is very much part of the comms strategy that will be referred to, and that Marcus will talk about. I think there's a broader sense to that as well, in that this also links into what we're doing with our access strategy, what I referred to earlier on, the work that we're doing within our own assets, such as libraries and other assets, in terms of creating that engagement with our citizens, and certainly our commitment to look at how we can bring the council, if you like, because I think I used the phrase back into our communities going forward. So there is a link between the comm strategy and that, and again, those are progressing. They're on track with what we said we would look to deliver. I know that in terms of some of the overall strategy around comms and what I've just talked about there is about how we actually assess performance and how we communicate what those outcomes are. And what we're looking to do is to be in a position from October to actually provide metrics which actually illustrate that far more clearly, and illustrate what those outcomes look like and what impact they're having. So those are two areas which as I said, we'll talk about a bit more in detail later on, but we're certainly on track with. There are two objectives within IT which Terence has covered, so I'm not aiming to go through those again. They're certainly on track, and those are around working with the third sector and voluntary organisations, as he referred to, and also the inclusive nature of the strategy as well. So I think, in terms of time, I'm not going to go through those in any detail. Terence covered those fine. So those are on track, absolutely. Procurement, in addition to the strategy, one of the crucial elements is how we ensure that inclusive strategy is inclusive in the sense of achieving real social value. I've been spending quite a lot of time discussing that with Jane and also other officers, in terms of what should that look like. How do we actually make that happen, particularly with the very significant investments that we're planning. It's crucial that something like the Cultural Heart, for example, and the work in Dewsbury, that we have legacy from that, and that's very much social value legacy. So currently, Jane's working on a pilot with the social value portal, and that's progressing. And again, that's on track, and this is certainly an area in which I want to drive even more so. Currently, we're looking at 10% of our contracts to demonstrate social value. That could change in the future. That could become more, but I think the crucial part of that 10% is making sure there are real outcomes that people feel and see on the ground. Whether that's going back to some of the comments from raised by Councillor Homewood earlier on about apprenticeships, whether that's creating new apprenticeships, new employment opportunities, creating linkages within communities to help with new entrepreneurs, establishing cooperatives, mutuals, etc. I'm certainly, from my perspective, very keen to drive those hard outcomes, as well as some of the, if you like, I'm saying softer, maybe that's probably the wrong word, but some of the other things such as volunteering. Because I think quite often people think social value is companies giving and donating some voluntary time to organisations, which is fantastic. But we need to make sure we've got something which is far harder than that in terms of ongoing legacy. So again, that work's been undertaken, and that is on track at the moment. And I think as we move forward, and certainly with the ongoing work in terms of Cultural Heart, we're going to see that in a much more transparent way, and see what we really are trying to drive in that particular area. In terms of libraries, again, crucial part of my portfolio, something I've referred to a couple of times. There is we're continuing with the capital development program. That's there's a project team in place which is looking at this on a monthly basis. There's a focus on a number of libraries. We're planning a new significant development in Heckmondwike. The library there is completely unfit for purpose at the moment. So there'll be a new library being developed. Investments in Holmfirth and Murfield. In addition, being connected into that, clearly ensuring the rest of our estate is up to kept up to scratch in terms of maintenance. So that work is being monitored on a monthly basis, team in place, and all the feasibility studies that we have, particularly for those 3 libraries, should be completed by May. Also, the library estate is very much about supporting our communities. Again, I've keep referring this time and time again, and that work has now started to pick up momentum again. We're starting to recruit new volunteers. Clearly, there was a big hit during the pandemic, and some people are very cautious about coming back anyway. So that work is now progressing. And also a real focus in all of our libraries about how we create spaces, inclusive, safe spaces, and that libraries are not just seen as libraries in the traditional sense, that it actually become a hub within those communities. So that, again, that work is progressing under Richard Parry's guidance, and Carol Stump as the chief librarian, head librarian. Access to services, we've talked about that earlier on, so I've already referred to that. That is on track. There are a number of pilots at the moment that the programme board within that area are putting in place to look at how best to implement the strategy and achieve the best outcomes. And Terence referred to the fact that we do have to look at a different system, because our current system will no longer be supported, and clearly we can't have that risk. And already within inquiries and contacts area of the service delivery and access, we are seeing some incremental improvements as we've been able to recruit and fill in vacant posts, though clearly we've got some way to go. So I think that's a quick overview for you. Have I missed? Oh yes, one other thing. Just to make people aware, on the financial side, I think you've already had an update on capital plan, and we have regular updates on the financial situation. There's been some fantastic work done by Eamon and the team on the DSG deficit, working with government agencies to develop an agreement which will help us manage that deficit going forward, and we're in the final stages of that being pulled together now. So that's really good news. So that is ongoing, but is absolutely vital part of our financial plan, because I think, as I've described a number of times, without that our DSG deficit will continue to grow and will be a major risk for us going forward. I think that's probably all I want to cover, and obviously answer any questions or any comments, etc.
Good stuff. So members, over to you. Nobody's got a hand up yet? Okay, I've got a question.
Sure.
Corporate landlord, that comes under your responsibilities, and
yep.
It is I think an important but sometimes overlooked part of the council's operations, and because a lot of it is about the public realm, it's about the management of the council's land, the management of the council's buildings that it has, and I do feel there's not enough visibility on that service in terms of the work that's being done, and yep. we should certainly have more. I have a lot to do with them in my role as a councillor, and a lot of the things that we come across are things like broken walls, land disputes, fly tipping, management of garage sites, and land for sale, and which land do we put up, what interest do we have in it. I think we could certainly do with a bit more visibility on it. I've noticed in the past that sometimes responses to queries from elected members has been not what it could be. Let's put it that way. And sometimes you have to send emails and make phone calls on a number of occasions. I believe it's better now. But I think certainly as a scrutiny panel, we should be looking a lot more into the role of the council's the commercial, the corporate estate in terms of its impact on the corporate realm, the public realm.
I would absolutely agree with you. I think the team, put in a huge amount of work, and I think it's largely and not known about. And you're right. I think one of the things that I've been working hard is to ensure that there's that engagement with the corporate landlord team and other aspects of our strategy. So I absolutely would be very, agree that we could do that, and I'd be very happy if you wanted to, the chair, to have something within corporate scrutiny just to look at what we're doing and also what our approaches are going forward. You're right, it's crucial. I think I probably end up talking, to be honest, to the corporate landlord team at least once a week, if not more. And since I've been in the portfolio, yeah, at least.
Yeah,
at least.
Well,
at least.
It's
But I think, yeah. Sorry,
there's a lot of corporate. There's a lot of the council's estate that is within the news and wards, so we have a lot of issues to deal with them. So that's and there's also the issue of leases for land which is leased to people and how those are managed and things. So there's a lot to go with.
Well, it's quite amazing. Just linked to that. So if I link corporate landlord and the asset team, I have to say it is quite amazing what we have got within Kirklees. And I've been doing a bit of a tour of our various assets, and it goes everything from a viaduct that we're responsible for in Cleckheaton down to the smallest little patch of land. So it's quite diverse, and getting the right priorities is not always easy. So, but yeah, I'd agree. I think it's extremely important, and certainly if at some stage you'd like the team to come forward and just go through what they cover, how they operate, and the challenges, and it would be good to get our feedback, I think, from corporate strategy to help us ensure that we're going the right way. So we're very happy to do that.
So obviously, we don't know what the future holds for the corporate scrutiny panel, but I'd like to put that forward as an item that we consider for the future work programme. Okay, if there's not anything else, I think we've come to the end of our programme. So thank you again to Philip for his service on here on the panel, and I call the meeting to an end. Thank you very much.
And
thanks to panel members for your work through the year, and thanks to Councillor Davies for attending. We now go in